My family called me a failure for years. Every time I talked about my dream, they laughed at me. They said I was wasting my time and throwing my future away. At one point, I almost believed them. My name is Ethan. I grew up in a family where success meant having a stable job and following the same path as everyone else. My parents wanted me to work in an office. My older brother had a good corporate job, and my relatives often compared me to him. But I had a different dream. I wanted to start my own business. It was not a huge company or a revolutionary idea. I simply wanted to build something of my own. Whenever I shared my plans, my family treated them like a joke. At family gatherings, they would ask if I was still chasing my little dream. Everyone would laugh, and I would force a smile, even though it hurt. After college, I used my savings to start a small online business. The first year was terrible. I made mistakes, lost money, and struggled to find customers. Every time something went wrong, my family used it as proof that they had been right all along. My brother told me to stop wasting time and get a real job. My uncle said I was too stubborn to admit I had failed. Even my cousins made jokes about me. There were days when I doubted myself. There were nights when I could not sleep because I was worried about bills and expenses. But despite all the criticism, I kept going. I continued learning, improving, and working harder than ever. What my family did not know was that the business was slowly starting to grow. And the people who laughed at me the most were about to witness something they never expected. Over the next few years, I worked harder than I ever had before. While my friends were enjoying weekends and holidays, I was working late into the night. I learned new skills, improved my products, and focused on giving customers the best service possible. Slowly, things started to change. More customers began finding my business. Sales increased every month. For the first time, I was making a real profit. I still remember the day I was able to pay off all my debts. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. But I did not tell my family. I wanted my results to speak for themselves. Meanwhile, they continued treating me like I had already failed. At family gatherings, the jokes never stopped. They still believed my business was just a hobby that would eventually disappear. 5 years after starting the business, everything changed. What began as a small online company had grown into a successful business with clients across the country. I moved into a larger office, hired employees, and expanded the company. For the first time in my life, I felt proud of what I had built. Then, something unexpected happened. The company where my brother worked announced major layoffs. Around the same time, my uncle's business started struggling financially. Within a few months, several members of my family were looking for work. Suddenly, the same people who once laughed at my dream were facing uncertainty themselves. I felt sorry for them, but I also remembered every joke, every insult, and every time they called me a failure. What happened next was something none of us could have imagined. One afternoon, I received a phone call from my brother. His voice sounded very different from the confident tone I was used to hearing. He explained that he had been unemployed for several months and was struggling to find work. Then he asked if my company was hiring. For a moment, I did not know what to say. Years earlier, he had told me that my business would never succeed. Now he was asking me for a job. A few days later, my uncle called with the same question. Then one of my cousins reached out. Before long, several family members were asking if I could help them. It felt strange. The people who once laughed at my dream were now depending on the business they had mocked. Part of me wanted to remind them of every hurtful thing they had said, but I stayed calm and listened. After thinking about it carefully, I decided to give them a chance. I interviewed them just like every other applicant. There were no special favors and no shortcuts. If they wanted a position, they had to earn it. Some of them seemed embarrassed during the interviews. Others avoided talking about the past altogether. Eventually, a few family members were hired because they had the right skills and experience. Watching them walk into the office on their first day was surreal. Years ago, they had called me a failure. Now they were working for the company I built from nothing. But the biggest surprise was not seeing them become employees. The biggest surprise was how their attitude toward me completely changed. For the first time, they started respecting the dream they once laughed at. And soon, they would finally understand how much their words had affected me. A few months later, my family and I attended a large family gathering. It was very different from the gatherings we used to have. This time, nobody was making jokes about my business. Nobody was calling me a failure. Instead, people were congratulating me and asking how I built the company. At one point, my uncle stood up and apologized in front of everyone. He admitted that he had been wrong about me. My brother apologized too. He said he never believed I would succeed because he was too focused on the traditional path. Hearing those words felt strange. For years, I had waited for someone to acknowledge what they had done. Now, it was finally happening. The people who once doubted me were admitting their mistakes. It did not erase the pain, but it gave me a sense of closure. Looking back, I realized something important. Success was never about proving my family wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could achieve my goals if I refused to give up. The best revenge was not making them feel small. The best revenge was building a life I was proud of. Over time, my relationship with my family improved. They learned to respect my choices, and I learned to let go of old resentments. As for the business, it continued to grow. Every time I walked into the office and saw what we had built, I remembered the days when everyone laughed at my dream. Those memories no longer made me angry. Instead, they reminded me how far I had come. In the end, the people who called me a failure became my employees. But the real victory was never the title or the success. The real victory was never giving up when nobody believed in me. Lesson: never let other people's doubts decide your future. Work hard, stay focused, and let your success speak for itself. Sometimes, the best revenge is proving that you were capable all along.